The night did not begin with sirens or warnings. It began with confusion. A low, thunder-like boom rolled across neighborhoods, followed by a brief, terrifying silence. Then another explosion. Windows rattled, lights flickered, and across multiple cities, people rushed to their phones at the same moment, asking the same question. What just happened? In a country already living under pressure, fear spread faster than facts. Within minutes, social media filled with shaky videos, distant flashes, and rumors that raced ahead of any official explanation. Iran, once again, was holding its breath. For years, Iran has existed in a state of permanent tension, economic strain, political unrest, regional rivalries, and internal distrust woven into daily life. So, when explosions erupt without warning, they are never interpreted as simple accidents. Every blast carries layers of meaning. Is it a failure of infrastructure, a warning shot, a covert operation, or something far more dangerous? On this night, uncertainty was the most powerful force of all. The lack of clarity turned ordinary sounds into threats and familiar streets into potential targets. State media moved quickly to calm the public, offering early explanations and urging patience. But calm is difficult to manufacture when trust is thin. Many Iranians remember past incidents, industrial accidents, mysterious fires, unexplained blasts that were initially dismissed and later reclassified or quietly forgotten. That history matters. It shapes how people interpret the present. When officials say, "There is no cause for alarm," citizens instinctively ask, "Why should we believe you now?" What made these explosions especially unsettling was their timing. Iran is navigating one of the most volatile periods in its recent history. The economy is under severe strain, sanctions continue to bite, and public frustration simmers just below the surface. Protests in recent years have shown how quickly anger can spill into the streets. In such an environment, any sudden shock, literal or symbolic, can become a catalyst. Even if the explosions were not deliberate attacks, their psychological impact was real and immediate. Across cities, families gathered indoors, keeping children close, checking doors and windows, and refreshing news feeds. Some feared escalation from abroad, others worried about internal instability. The most unsettling possibility was not any single explanation, but the fact that no explanation felt fully convincing. In moments like this, ambiguity becomes a weapon. It erodes confidence, fuels speculation, and deepens the sense that events are spinning beyond anyone's control. International observers watch closely. Iran does not exist in isolation. Every incident is filtered through a global lens. Regional rivals assess whether the blasts signal weakness or provocation. Allies look for signs of escalation. Markets react to uncertainty, and diplomatic channels quietly activate. Even a localized incident can ripple outward, influencing calculations far beyond Iran's borders. This is the paradox of modern geopolitics. Small events can carry massive consequences when they occur in the right or wrong context. Inside Iran, the leadership faced a familiar dilemma: move too aggressively and risk escalating fear or drawing unwanted attention. Every statement, every pause, every word choice mattered. In the absence of transparency, people filled the gaps themselves. Some blamed decades-old infrastructure and chronic underinvestment. Others pointed to sabotage, foreign intelligence, or internal power struggles. Each theory found an audience because each fit into an existing narrative of suspicion. The explosions also reopened deeper questions about resilience and fragility. How stable is the system, really? How much pressure can it absorb before cracks become impossible to hide? Iran's history is marked by endurance, surviving war, sanctions, isolation. But endurance does not mean invulnerability. Repeated shocks, even small ones, can accumulate. They wear down confidence. They normalize fear. They teach people to expect the unexpected, and not in a good way. As night turned into early morning, the immediate danger seemed to pass, but the unease remained. Streets were quieter than usual. Conversations were hushed. People waited for daylight, believing, perhaps irrationally, that answers are easier to face in the sun. But daylight does not always bring clarity. Sometimes it only reveals how little is actually known. Analysts debated possibilities, yet the core feeling persisted. Something is not right, and whatever it is, it feels bigger than a single incident. This is how fear takes root, not through spectacle alone, but through repetition and uncertainty. Explosions erupt, explanations lag, trust erodes, and the cycle repeats. Each time, the psychological threshold lowers. What once would have shocked now merely alarms. What once alarmed now simply confirms expectations. That slow shift may be the most dangerous outcome of all. A society accustomed to sudden shocks is a society living on edge. By the end of the day, Iran was still standing, but it was not the same Iran that had gone to sleep the night before. Questions lingered unanswered. Tensions remained unresolved. And beneath the official statements and expert debates lay a quieter truth. Millions of people felt less safe than they did yesterday. Whether these explosions were accidents, warnings, or something else entirely, Their impact was undeniable. They reminded the nation and the world that in Iran's current moment, stability is fragile, fear is contagious, and even a single night can change the emotional landscape of an entire country. As the initial shock faded, a more dangerous phase began: interpretation. In Iran, explosions are never just physical events. They become political symbols almost instantly. By the second day, the question was no longer what exploded, but what does this mean? The silence between official updates grew louder, and in that silence, competing narratives took shape. Each one revealed something deeper about the country, its internal fractures and the pressures squeezing it from all sides. Inside government circles, the priority was control of information, a perception of momentum. Statements emphasized stability and continuity. Investigations were announced, committees formed, and reassurances repeated. But repetition does not equal reassurance. For many citizens, the language felt rehearsed, detached from lived reality. When officials spoke of isolated incidents, people compared those words to their own experiences. The shaking walls, the fear in their children's eyes, the unanswered questions. The disconnect widened. At the same time, Iran's long history with covert conflict hovered over every discussion. The country has spent decades in a shadow war: cyber attacks, sabotage claims, mysterious fires, and targeted strikes that are rarely acknowledged outright. This history conditions public perception. Even when authorities insist on technical failures or accidents, many assume there is more beneath the surface. The result is a constant state of suspicion, where truth becomes harder to separate from expectation. Regionally, the explosions landed like a stone dropped into already turbulent waters. The Middle East is defined by tension layered upon tension. Any sign of instability in Iran sends ripples across borders. Rival states watch closely for weakness. Allies assess whether support needs to be adjusted. Non-state actors recalibrate their strategies. In this environment, ambiguity can be as destabilizing as open conflict. Not knowing who or what is responsible keeps everyone guessing, and guessing breeds caution, escalation, or both. International media amplified this uncertainty. Headlines framed the events dramatically, often pairing them with broader narratives of unrest, sanctions, and geopolitical rivalry. While some coverage urged restraint and patience, other reporting leaned into speculation. For global audiences, Iran is often portrayed through the lens of crisis, and each explosion reinforces that image. This matters because perception influences policy. A country seen as unstable is treated differently on the world stage. Within Iran, the psychological impact deepened. People began to connect the explosions to their daily struggles: rising prices, power outages, shortages, and a sense of stagnation. Even if unrelated, the events felt symbolic, like physical manifestations of systemic decay. Conversations shifted from fear to frustration. Not just what happened, but why does this keep happening to us? That question carries weight because it challenges legitimacy and competence at the highest levels. Social media played a critical role in shaping this phase. Videos, voice notes, and eyewitness accounts circulated faster than any official briefing. Some posts aimed to inform, others to provoke. In the absence of trusted information, emotionally charged content spread easily. Fear mixed with anger, anger with sarcasm, sarcasm with despair. Authorities attempted to counter misinformation, but the sheer volume made control nearly impossible. In the digital age, narrative dominance is fragile. Economically, the timing could not have been worse. Markets react to uncertainty, and even rumors can trigger real consequences. Businesses delayed decisions. Investors grew cautious. Ordinary people worried about what might come next. Another disruption, another shock. For a population already stretched thin, the explosions felt like yet another burden added to an already heavy load. Stability is not just about security, it is about predictability, and predictability was in short supply. Behind closed doors, analysts debated scenarios. Was this a warning sign of deeper infrastructure problems, evidence of internal sabotage, a message from an external adversary, or a convergence of failures in a system under strain? Each possibility carried different implications, but all pointed to vulnerability. Even the most benign explanation suggested neglect and mismanagement. The more hostile explanations suggested exposure and risk. None were comforting. Historically, moments like this can become turning points, or fade into the background as just another crisis survived. Iran's leadership has often relied on endurance, betting that time and control will dull public reaction. Sometimes that strategy works. Other times, small events accumulate until they cross an invisible threshold. The challenge is that thresholds are only obvious in hindsight. At the moment, everything feels manageable, until suddenly it isn't. For ordinary Iranians, life continued, but with an edge. Schools reopened, shops unlocked their doors, traffic returned. Yet the atmosphere was different. People listened more closely to sounds, scanned headlines more often, spoke more cautiously. Fear does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it settles quietly into routines. That quiet fear can be more corrosive than panic because it lingers. By the end of the second phase, one thing was clear. The explosions were no longer just events. They had become a lens through which Iranians viewed their present and future. Whether caused by accident or design, they exposed fragility of infrastructure, of trust, of confidence. And once fragility is exposed, it cannot be unseen. The real danger now was not another blast, but what prolonged uncertainty might do to a society already under immense pressure. By the third day, the immediate shock of the explosions had evolved into a pervasive anxiety that touched every aspect of Iranian life. The initial fear had been raw and visceral, windows rattling, walls trembling, children crying. But now it had taken on a subtler, more insidious form. People were no longer just reacting to blasts. They were anticipating them, scanning streets and sky for signs of danger, replaying news reports, and analyzing every social media post for hidden clues. This was the phase where terror becomes woven into the fabric of daily life, turning ordinary routines into exercises in vigilance. In Tehran, Bandar Abbas, Ahvaz, and other affected cities, the human response was complex. Families adjusted schedules, avoiding travel in areas near previous explosions. Some schools implemented emergency drills, partly out of precaution, partly to calm anxious students. Shops and businesses that could afford to close temporarily did so, while those that could not took heightened safety measures. Every minor tremor, every distant sound became a trigger for speculation and fear. The nation was learning to live in a heightened state of alert, where uncertainty dictated behavior. This anxiety extended far beyond immediate physical danger. Psychologists and sociologists note that prolonged periods of uncertainty and perceived threat create what is known as anticipatory stress. Unlike acute fear, anticipatory stress does not pass with the resolution of an event. It lingers, subtly affecting decision-making, trust in authorities, and even social cohesion. Iranians were beginning to feel this collective strain, often without realizing how profoundly it shaped interactions with family, neighbors, and colleagues. Conversations carried a caution that had not existed before. Silence, once ordinary, became a shield, and the rhythm of life subtly shifted to accommodate unspoken anxieties. Meanwhile, the political ramifications were mounting. Iran's leadership faced the delicate task of projecting control while avoiding escalation. Any misstep, an overreaction, a misstatement, or contradictory messages could inflame already fragile public sentiment. Internally, debates over messaging, blame, and policy intensified. Officials navigated a labyrinth of priorities: reassure the population, maintain operational control, safeguard international credibility, and prevent further instability. Each decision carried risks, because the line between calm and panic is razor thin. In a society under constant scrutiny, externally, regional powers watched closely, analyzing every development for signs of weakness or opportunity. Rival states monitored Iranian military readiness, infrastructure resilience, and internal cohesion. Allies assessed whether to increase support or intervention. In this environment, even minor explosions could be interpreted as signals, deliberate or accidental, about Iran's vulnerabilities. The global media amplified these perceptions, blending factual reporting with speculation, which in turn influenced foreign policy discussions, stock markets, and diplomatic strategy. The third day of explosions had transformed from a local incident into a matter of international consequence. The economic implications were significant as well. Local industries, particularly in affected cities like Bandar Abbas, faced immediate disruptions. Shipping schedules were delayed, production halted, and workers remained hesitant to enter potentially unsafe areas. On a broader scale, uncertainty began to affect investor confidence, currency stability, and trade negotiations. Even if the physical damage was contained, the economic ripple effect extended across regions and sectors, demonstrating how fear and speculation can carry as much weight as direct destruction. Social media remained a double-edged sword. On one hand, it provided a vital platform for information dissemination, coordination of aid, and eyewitness reporting. On the other, it amplified rumors, fear, and speculation. Videos of minor fires, structural damage, or even unrelated accidents were shared widely, often framed as additional explosions or attacks. Analysts noted the speed at which misinformation could influence public perception. For a population already in distress, the digital amplification of fear became almost as powerful as the explosions themselves. In communities, a subtle transformation began to take hold. Trust, once assumed, became conditional. People questioned official narratives, weighed rumors against reality, and formed micro-networks of verification. Informal communication channels, neighbors, local leaders, private messaging groups gained importance. This shift is not unique to Iran, but the context intensified it. Years of economic stress, political uncertainty, and previous incidents of unexplained destruction had already eroded baseline trust. The explosions now acted as catalysts, accelerating a social recalibration where skepticism and caution became the norm. Psychologically, the population faced a dual challenge, coping with immediate fear while confronting deeper questions about governance and resilience. Many Iranians began reflecting on systemic issues: aging infrastructure, energy management failures, lack of transparency in disaster response, and broader political instability. Even if the explosions were technically accidents, the perception was that these incidents revealed deeper flaws in the system. In the minds of citizens, fragility was no longer hypothetical. It was visible, audible, and undeniably real. At the same time, rumors of external involvement continued to circulate. Some speculated that foreign intelligence services had targeted sensitive locations to undermine Iran's regional posture. Others suggested internal factions were responsible, either to settle scores or to push political agendas. While no evidence confirmed such claims, the speculation itself contributed to tension, further destabilizing both public perception and political discourse. Fear of the unknown can be more corrosive than fear of a known threat, and in this phase, the unknown dominated. Amid these pressures, Iranian leadership faced increasing pressure to demonstrate competence and control. Public appearances, statements, and site visits were carefully choreographed to convey stability. Technical teams worked around the clock to assess damages, repair critical infrastructure, and reassure citizens. At the same time, security forces increased patrols, particularly around strategic locations, signaling that the state remained vigilant. These measures were both practical and symbolic. They addressed real safety concerns while projecting authority. By the end of the third day, a sense of collective anxiety had solidified into a cautious equilibrium. Life continued, but with new rhythms and unspoken rules. Parents monitored children more closely. Citizens scrutinized local infrastructure, and daily routines incorporated contingencies for potential danger. Social and political conversations were shaded with skepticism. Even as news coverage shifted to other stories, the psychological imprint of the explosions remained, a reminder that sudden, unexplained events could reshape behavior and perception long after the immediate danger had passed. The third day revealed a critical lesson. Resilience is not just a function of physical infrastructure, but of perception, trust, and social cohesion. A nation may survive blasts without catastrophic loss of life, but if fear and uncertainty dominate consciousness, the societal impact can be profound. Iran's population, already accustomed to tension, now faced the challenge of integrating yet another traumatic episode into daily life. The explosions were not only events, they were mirrors reflecting vulnerabilities that had long been present but seldom confronted so directly. In essence, the third day was the bridge between shock and consequence. It marked the transition from immediate reaction to long-term reflection. Citizens, analysts, and officials alike recognized that the real work had only begun. Physical recovery would take time, but the battle for confidence, trust, and social stability would continue far longer. In the interplay of fear, speculation, and observation, Iran was confronting a complex reality. Survival is not enough. Stability, legitimacy, and cohesion must also be preserved. Tasks far more intricate than repairing damaged buildings or extinguishing fires. As the days following the explosions stretched into a tense routine, Iran found itself at a crossroads. The immediate danger, the loud, destructive bursts that had rattled windows, shattered nerves, and left citizens questioning safety, had passed. Yet the real challenge was only beginning. The nation was now facing the subtler, more insidious consequences of fear, uncertainty, and the psychological aftershocks of repeated trauma. How a society responds in the aftermath of such events often shapes its trajectory for months or even years, and Iran's path was no exception. Across affected cities, reconstruction began on multiple levels. Physical rebuilding was immediate. Damaged buildings were repaired, infrastructure inspected, and emergency services reassessed protocols. In Bandar Abbas, teams worked around the clock to repair utilities and stabilize residential areas affected by the blasts. In Ahvaz, local authorities coordinated with hospitals and rescue services to ensure that survivors received medical care and psychological support. At the same time, governmental committees launched formal investigations to determine the causes, examining everything from gas pipelines and electrical systems to potential human error or foul play. While these steps were necessary, they could only address part of the problem. The more complex task was restoring public confidence. For many citizens, fear had become a constant companion. Daily routines carried an underlying tension. Walking to the store, sending children to school, commuting through familiar streets, all activities were subtly altered by caution. Mental health professionals observed signs of prolonged stress, sleep disturbances, heightened anxiety, and a pervasive sense of vigilance. Unlike acute trauma, which is intense but short-lived, this anticipatory stress can linger, affecting social cohesion and the willingness of individuals to trust institutions. Public statements by officials, no matter how carefully worded, could not erase the memory of trembling walls, bright flashes, and the sirens that had pierced the night. Politically, the explosions forced a delicate balancing act. Iran's leadership had to demonstrate competence while avoiding panic, projecting authority while addressing legitimate public concern. Every message was scrutinized, every visit by officials analyzed for both content and symbolism. Security forces increased their presence around strategic locations, signaling vigilance, but this also served to remind citizens of potential threats. International observers watched the government's response closely, interpreting both words and actions as indicators of internal stability and resilience. The stakes were high, because perceptions of instability can affect everything from foreign investment to diplomatic relations. One key challenge was navigating competing narratives. Social media continued to play a pivotal role in shaping public perception. Eyewitness videos, images of damaged infrastructure, and first-hand accounts circulated rapidly, often faster than official statements. While these posts provided important insights, they also fueled speculation and fear. Analysts noted that the rapid spread of information and misinformation can exacerbate anxiety, particularly when verification is slow or incomplete. Citizens had to navigate a maze of conflicting reports, weighing what to believe and whom to trust. In this environment, ambiguity became a weapon, influencing both behavior and sentiment. Externally, the explosions sent subtle ripples through the geopolitical landscape. Iran's neighbors, regional rivals, and global powers all interpreted the events through their own lenses. Some saw the incidents as evidence of internal weakness, potentially signaling opportunities for leverage. Others considered the possibility of deliberate foreign interference, heightening regional tension. Even if the explosions were ultimately determined to be accidental, the perception of vulnerability carried consequences. Diplomacy, trade negotiations, and strategic planning were all affected by how these events were framed and understood internationally. Internally, the explosions exposed deeper systemic vulnerabilities. Iran has long struggled with aging infrastructure, energy distribution challenges, and underinvestment in critical safety systems. Even if the immediate cause was accidental, the events highlighted the fragility of essential services. Citizens began to question not only the competence of local authorities, but also the ability of the broader system to prevent future disasters. These questions were not rhetorical, they had practical implications. Public trust, once eroded, is difficult to rebuild, and repeated incidents risk turning temporary anxiety into lasting skepticism. In families and communities, social dynamics shifted subtly but significantly. Parents monitored children more closely, neighbors shared information with heightened scrutiny, and local networks became essential for reassurance. Everyday conversations carried undertones of caution and reflection. People debated what measures could be taken to protect themselves and their loved ones. Even when life resumed a semblance of normality, the psychological imprint of the explosions persisted. Fear had become institutionalized in routines, influencing decisions and interactions across multiple levels of society. The economic impact was equally profound. Short-term disruptions were visible in delayed shipments, interrupted production, and cautious consumer behavior. Long-term consequences were harder to quantify, but equally real. Investor confidence, public sentiment, and risk assessment models all factored in perceptions of instability. Even minor disruptions in key industrial zones affected supply chains and financial forecasts. The explosions served as a reminder that uncertainty, even when indirect, can have measurable economic consequences. By the fifth and sixth days, Iran faced the challenge of integrating lessons from the events into policy and practice. Officials emphasized safety audits, emergency preparedness, and improved communication channels. Technical teams reviewed energy grids, gas lines, and building standards. Hospitals and emergency responders refined protocols for mass casualty scenarios. These measures were designed to prevent recurrence and reassure the population. Yet the deeper work, restoring trust, stabilizing public sentiment, and reinforcing social cohesion, was ongoing and far more complex. At the societal level, a subtle recalibration was underway. Citizens learned to navigate uncertainty with caution, balancing vigilance with daily routines. By the end of the first week, one truth had become undeniable. The explosions, whether accidental or deliberate, had left an indelible mark. Iran was not physically destroyed, but the nation's psychological landscape had shifted. Citizens, analysts, and policymakers alike recognized that stability is not measured solely by absence of disaster. True resilience requires trust, transparency, and confidence in both institutions and social networks. The events had illuminated vulnerabilities that were previously latent, and the task of addressing them extended far beyond repairing buildings or restoring services. Ultimately, the lessons were clear. Societies facing repeated shocks must prioritize not only physical preparedness, but also psychological resilience and institutional credibility. In Iran, this meant investing in infrastructure, improving emergency response systems, fostering transparent communication, and rebuilding trust between citizens and authorities. It also meant acknowledging uncertainty honestly, preparing for potential escalation, and understanding the profound influence of perception on stability. As the nation moves forward, the memory of the explosions will linger, shaping behavior, policy, and perception. Citizens will carry heightened awareness and caution. Officials will weigh the impact of each decision more carefully. Regional and global observers will interpret every sign through a lens of scrutiny. The events demonstrated that the consequences of fear extend beyond immediate destruction. They permeate daily life, influence strategic calculations, and reshape societal expectations. In conclusion, Iran's experience over these explosive days serves as a case study in the intersection of uncertainty, resilience, and perception. The blasts were not merely physical, they were symbolic, psychological, and geopolitical. They underscored the delicate balance required to maintain stability in a nation facing multiple pressures, and they highlighted the importance of trust, transparency, and preparedness. The nation survived the immediate danger, but the broader challenges of confidence, cohesion, and resilience remain. Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis insightful, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth coverage of world events. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.